The Gemara tells us, Lasid Lovo, in days to come, every human being will stand in judgment. Every nation, every culture, every civilization will stand in front of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and Hashem will judge them for what they did, what they didn't do, what they accomplished, what they brought to the world. And this day of judgment is complete. Every human being who is ever created stands in one moment in front of Hashem and is judged. The Gemara is very clear that Hashem takes his Sefer Torah, Manichu B'cheiko, leaves it in his lap, Kaviyachol V'kabi V'omer, and Hashem says these words, L'misha Osak Bo Yovo V'yitol Scharo. Whoever had a part in the learning of Torah, whoever had a part in supporting Torah, come get your reward. Says the Gemara, Miyad, immediately, Kol Umas Olam, every nation comes rushing forth Bervuvia in a tumult. We had a part, we supported, everyone comes rushing. And Hashem says, stop. If you feel you have a claim, if you feel you supported Torah, let each nation send its wise men, let each nation send its representatives, and let them explain why it is that they feel that they have a reward, they have a portion in the Torah learning that had happened. And where it says the first nation that comes forth is Malchus Romi. For some reason they're the most important. And the Roman leaders, the Roman wise men come in front of Hashem, and Hashem says, how were you osik in Torah? How were you involved in Torah study? How did you support Torah? What do you claim was your part of it? They say, Ribbono Shel Olam Hashem, Habi Shvakim Takinu. How many marketplaces we made? Do you know how complex an economy we created? Why do we do that? We did it for one reason, so that the Jews could learn Torah. They had to earn a living. They had to find a means of support. We made a complex society, created many, many marketplaces, created the opportunities that they could earn their living without spending that much time, and then they could go back to learn. All that we did for them to learn. Harbi Merchotzos, we made many recreational bathhouses. Why did we do that? So the Jews could have a place to relax. Harbi Kesivik Zav Kesinu, we gathered together much gold and much silver. Why did we do that? Everything that we did so the Klal Yisrael could learn. We have a part. We deserve reward. And Hashem answers them. Hashem says, Shotim Sheba'olam, fools of the world. Everything that you did for yourself. Those marketplaces you created, you did for your own wealth. The bathhouses you created for your own recreation. Money and gold doesn't belong to you anyway. Says the Gemara, Miyad, immediately they leave the Pachei Nefesh, depressed, broken. And the next empire comes forth. Next is the Persian. The Persian Empire comes forth, their wise men, their representatives, and Hashem says the same thing to them. What did you do to support Torah learning? What's your involvement? Why do you think you have reward? And they say to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Harbi Gesharim Gesharnu. Look at the many bridges that we built. Look at the many cities that we conquered. Look at the many wars that we went to. We weren't like the Romans who just gave money. We gave our blood, our young boys, so that the Jews should be safe, so that bands of rival groups shouldn't come and kill them. Why did we do all this? All that we did so the Klal Yisrael should learn Torah. And amazingly, Hashem answers them as well. Shotim Sheba'olam, fools of the world. Everything you did for yourself. The bridges you built to collect taxes. The wars that you waged was for your own honor and your own aggrandizement. Miyad, immediately they leave the Pachei Nefesh, depressed and broken. And here's the question. If I stand here now and I tell you something, it may be true, it may not be true. If you've ever bought a used car, you know that not every word that every human being says is exactly the truth. But this Gemara is not discussing here and now. Here I hide behind this heavy cloak of physicality, wrapped inside this body. I could think what I think, say what I say, and you'll never know whether it's true or not. But this Gemara is discussing a different time period. And this Gemara is talking about standing in front of HaKadosh Baruch Hu at that ultimate moment of truth. And here's the question. How could these people tell such lies? The Roman Empire, what they did was so that the Jews should learn Torah? It's not true at all. They were enemies. The Persian Empire, everything that they did was so the Jews could learn. How could they have the audacity to tell such a bald-faced lie? But listen to the lie. They didn't say the Jews also benefited. They didn't say our primary interests were ourselves, but the Jews also benefited. Kulam lo asinu, nothing that we did Ela Kadesha Yisrael Yalmdu Torah. Everything that we did was so that the Jewish people should learn. And it sounds absurd. It sounds ridiculous. How could they say such a bald-faced lie? How could they tell such a sheker? And if you don't hear this question, let's focus on it a little bit more. If you study the march of progress of the past 5,000 odd years, you see that mankind has evolved so many different dimensions of control over nature. If you look at the past 500 years, from the invention of the printing press, the scientific revolution, the germ theory, the industrial revolution, now the technological revolution, mankind has brought such wonders to the world, and we live in a world of such ease, comfort, luxuries. We take technology each for granted, but I want you to understand that each step was built layer after layer. It took an entire cadre, thousands upon thousands of men of each generation dedicated to discover their discoveries, and each generation, each culture built on the one before it. And what we enjoy today is the fruit of thousands of years of mankind's knowledge, understanding, and progress. Well, listen to what this Gemara is saying. It's not just saying that the Romans come forth and claim what they did was so that the Jewish people should learn. It's not just the Persians. Kol Umma v'Umma. After the Romans and after the Persians, every culture, every civilization comes forth with the same claim. Everything that we brought to mankind, every advancement, everything that we improved, all we did for one reason, so that the Jewish people should learn Torah. And the question is, how could you say such a absolute sheker, a complete lie in front of Hashem in this moment in time? And why does Hashem even entertain it, calling them fools, saying you did it for your own good? It sounds ridiculous. And I'd like to see if we could better understand what in fact Chazal are telling us, and how in fact the various nations thought that they would have a claim, and why Hashem answers them. And to do that, I think we need to take a little bit of a study of some of the basics of Emunah. And let me explain to you what I mean. In benching, we say some interesting words. Hazan es olam kulo. Hashem, you feed the entire world, from the Congo to the Sahara Desert, from the beetles to the lizards, to the chimpanzees, every animal in creation, including man, you feed. But that's not just all that we say. Hu nosein lechem l'chol basar. Hashem, you give bread to every creation, every creature. And included in that is I, the recipient. Hashem, I thank you for the bread that I eat. Now I'd like to ask you the obvious question on benching. I buy my bread at Zisha's bakery. Zisha buys his flour from the mill, who buys the flour from a large distributor, who buys it from a co-op, who buys it from Joe, the farmer, out in Idaho. Man baked this bread. Man harvested the wheat, brought it to the mill, ground it, sold it, brought it to the baker, and the baker baked the bread. Now I'm not denying that Hashem created the world, and I'm not denying that Hashem keeps the world going. But why are we thanking Hashem? As if man didn't have a part in it? Hashem created the world, Hashem runs the world, but this bread was baked by man. We should thank man, not Hashem. Why are we saying the word thank you Hashem for this bread that I eat, when it was man who deserves the credit? And I think this question isn't such a simple question. And to answer it, I want to share with you something very profound. The Meshech Chochmah explains the Gemara. The Gemara says, Kol Omer Halal Agadol B'chol Yom, whoever recites the complete Halal every day, Harei ze Macharef u'Megadef, is a blasphemer. If a person sees miracles every day that Hashem brings in his life, if a person says, wow, look at this, Hashem intervened, Hashem interrupted the normal flow of nature, and a person sees that level of miracles every day, and he says the Hallel HaGadol every day, says the Gemara, that person is a blasphemer, he's almost a kofar, he's almost a denier. Now, you should ask the obvious question in that Gemara, that man's a tzaddik. If I were to see miracles every day that Hashem interferes with nature, Hashem intercedes, Hashem is involved in my life in a very miraculous manner, why do you call me a blasphemer? You should call me a tremendous mamin. And explains to Meshech Chochmah that there's a reason why Hashem will bring a miracle. Hashem doesn't need to bring a miracle to save a person. Hashem didn't need to split the Yam to deliver the Jews from Mitzrayim. Hashem could work within the Derech HaTeva as he always does. Explains to Meshech Chochmah, there's only one reason why Hashem will ever bring a miracle, and that's to show us who created, maintains, and orchestrates everything in nature. The only reason why Hashem demonstrates his control over physicality is to show us that everything in the physical world has been created by Hashem, is maintained by Hashem. And more than that, explains to Meshech Chochmah, when you see a leaf growing on a tree, when you see a seed that somehow grows into an oak tree, you're watching Hashem. The Ramban in the end of Bo explains there's no such thing as nature. Hashem created this world and Hashem maintains it. And what that means in plain simple language is, when you see a seed dividing and the cells forming the different specific types of cells that they're supposed to become, you're watching Hashem who created it and keeps it, maintains it, and brings it through every step of the process. It looks like it's man, it's very natural, it looks like it's just nature happening, but we fail to realize that it's actually Hashem on a regular, ongoing basis. I once saw an interesting video where a fellow planted a tripod right before this, at the actually end of winter. He planted a tripod and he set the timer on it to take 4 pictures every day. It was pointed directly at a tree, a large barren tree. And it took 4 pictures equally spaced in time every day, and day after day throughout the early spring, throughout the summer, as the tree became fully blossomed and then the leaves shed. And afterwards he melded all these still photos into a video, and at 32 frames a second what you saw was miraculous. You saw a tree suddenly starting to grow buds, and the buds started taking shape, and the shape started to leaves, and the leaves started filling out, and you saw in a 12-second span this barren tree turn into this fully laden tree. And you saw the miracle of nature. The Ramban explains, if you'd like to understand what nature is, you're watching Hashem's total, complete involvement in running everything that happens. It looks like it's nature. It looks like Hashem could have created it and left it, but you don't understand what's really happening. And if you'd like to understand Hashem's relationship to physicality, I'd like to give you a mashal. I want you to imagine the following. Imagine it's a cold February evening, and I'm waiting for the bus. It's at night, and I'm starting to shiver, freezing cold. So I got to get out of it. I close my eyes, and I imagine a beautiful beach scene, 85 degrees, white sand, cloudless sky, ocean blue, one lone seagull wafting by, until the bus comes, splash! Gone is the sand, gone is the ocean blue, gone is the seagull. I'm the dreamer. As long as I think about the sand, as long as I'm conscious of the water, as long as I have the seagull in my mind, it exists. The minute that I cease thinking about it, it's no longer there. If you'd like to understand Hashem's relationship to the physical world, Hashem is the creator, maintainer, and orchestrator of everything that happens. A rock that exists was created by Hashem, but requires Hashem to keep it in existence. And we assume that much like when we create things, it's creative. When man creates, he takes elements that are in existence and reshuffles them. Hashem took from absolute tohu vavo, from absolute absence of anything, Hashem said, Vayehi. And when Hashem created the physical world, it requires constant infusion of energy. And Hashem's relationship to the physical world is Hashem is the creator and the maintainer. If you see a rock, if you see water, you see Hashem. You see Hashem keeping it, maintaining it, keeping it where it's supposed to be. And if you watch any part of nature, you're watching Nisim Ritzufim, constant, continuous miracles. It looks very natural, and it's quite predictable. But the predictions are that because Hashem did it yesterday this way, He'll continue doing it. But that's Hashem's involvement in every part of nature. Anything that you see grow, any part of the wild kingdom, and anything you see in existence, you're watching Hashem right there, keeping it, molding it, keeping it in existence. And that's Hashem's relationship to the physical world, and that's Hashem's relationship to nature. But what's Hashem's involvement in our world? What's Hashem's involvement in society, in the goings-on of mankind? So I'll share with you an interesting thought. The Chofetz Chaim says, in his introduction to Sha'ar HaBitachon, he says that an alchemist, a person who can convert base metals into gold, is very, very well set. He has nothing to worry about in his financial world. He takes metal, turns it into gold, he's set. He explains the Chofetz Chaim that a Baal Bitachon, a person who trusts in Hashem, is much better off than an alchemist. Why, he says? And he gives 10 reasons. If a person trusts in Hashem, he's better off than the alchemist for 10 different reasons. And one of those reasons is very compelling. He explains that the alchemist must hide a secret. The alchemist cannot let a single human being know that he can turn lead into gold. Why? Because if he ever lets it out, Hashem will kill him. Why? Because Hashem wants it to be an economy. Hashem wants there to be a system of trade. For me to trade my sheep for your cow, it's too difficult. Therefore Hashem put a love of gold within the heart of man. Gold is the center of the economy. Certainly it was gold-based for a long time, but it became the currency against which all paper was measured. Gold was the center of it all. And it explains the Chofetz Chaim that if a person has the capacity to turn lead into gold, it would instantly destroy any economy, because there's no value system anymore. And the world will cease to exist as it does, and Hashem would never let that happen. And therefore, explains the Chofetz Chaim, an alchemist, if he has this capacity, must keep his secret, because otherwise Hashem will kill him, because it will destroy the world. And this is a very interesting insight. Why? Because what it means in plain language is that behind the scenes, Hashem is very involved in what's happening. When you see the market crash and it drops 700 points, no one understands that Hashem is directly not involved, the cause, the 100% gorem and cause of it. And if the market increases and goes up, Hashem is totally involved in that. But it's not just economies. I remember hearing many times my Rebbe, the Shiva Zatzal, would quote his father. You ever notice that technologies, discoveries suddenly happen? But when they happen, a number of people seem to be right there. And people are astonished. Look at the brilliance of Edison. Look at the wisdom of Newton. Look what they uncovered. The Shiva's father used to say that Hashem wants that knowledge out there at a certain time, at a certain point, and whoever happens to be at the forefront of that study is going to discover it, but only exactly when Hashem wants to. And when that's the right time, he can discover it, or he or anyone else. Happens to be, obviously, if you're the man on the scene, it's more likely you'll discover it. But the reason why it's uncovered then is because that's exactly the time that Hashem wants that knowledge to be given to man, and you can watch the sequence. When it becomes uncovered, many times it's simultaneous. One person in Germany, another person in Austria, another person in France discovers it almost at the same time, because what you're watching is Hashem revealing parts of the world to man. And what we forget and what we cease to understand is how involved Hashem is in the running of the world, how involved Hashem is in what happens in the writing of headlines. And I want to share with you some basic observations which I think may be very simple, but they're worth saying. The Rambam makes an observation on a pasuk in Chumash. Som tasim alecha melech. The Jewish people are commanded, when you enter Eretz Yisrael, appoint a king. Choose a king. Choose. Som tasim. Sim. Put your own king. Asher yivcha Hashem lakecha, that Hashem will choose. The Rambam says, wait a minute. Choose a king. That means you're supposed to choose. That Hashem chooses. Either you choose or Hashem chooses. Who's choosing? Says the Rambam, that's exactly what the pasuk's telling you. Any ruler over a nation is appointed by Hashem. It is impossible for a human being to self-appoint himself. It is impossible for an electorate body to appoint a human being. Hashem appoints every ruler over nations. And it's very interesting to note. You ever notice right around election times, things just suddenly spin out of control? Hillary Clinton was the front runner by far. There was no question that she was going to have the Democratic nomination, probably win the presidency, and all of a sudden there's an email scandal and 22,000 emails are deleted from her personal email server, many of which were issues of state secret. But it wasn't uncovered, it wasn't discovered until the critical moment, right, when the presidential runnings are beginning to get heated up. A fellow called Donald Trump, who no one knew who he was other than some reality TV show, who was, excuse my expression, everyone assumed he was I don't want to say a clown, but he wasn't taken seriously, all of a sudden is, and you ever notice every presidential election, people come from out of nowhere. A senator with 2 years experience, an absolute junior with no world experience, no political experience, nothing to make him eligible, wins the most powerful position in the world. And when you see these things happening, you're watching the Yad Hashem. And if you'd like to know who's going to win the election, I'll tell you exactly who's going to win. Exactly the person that Hashem determines is the right one. And as the Ramban says, there's no such concept. No prime minister, no president, no king, no despot, no monarch, no ruler ever ruled over a nation that wasn't put into power by Hashem. But it really goes a lot further than that. If you pay attention in davening, Vayivarach David, we say it every day in Shachris, and listen to what the pasuk says, L'cha Hashem amlocha, Hashem, to you is rulership, Vamisnase l'chol rosh. What do those words mean? So normally we translate that as, Hashem, you're above every ruler, as great as any king is, as great as any mayor, governor, prime minister, Hashem, you're even above that. Says the Gemara in Basra, that's not pshat. That's not what the pasuk's saying. Misnase l'chol rosh means that Hashem appoints every leader. And the Gemara in Baba Basra explains what that means. Every leader over the smallest sort of position, even water rights. Meaning to say, if there's a leader of men in any position, in any situation, that person is appointed by Hashem. And what that means in plain language is Hashem is very, very busy. I'm not going to bore you with the details, and I doubt you have time for it, but if you'd like to know the amount of people who are in power in this country alone, from elected officials from city, county, local officials, judges and commissioners, heads of departments, Department of Housing, Department of Water, mayor, governors, senators, congressmen, heads of banks, presidents, universities, CEOs, ministers, generals, admirals, fire chiefs, heads of police, the number is astonishing. And it's not because the United States of America is made up of all chiefs and no Indians. It's because to keep 300 million people in a system of organized government, in a system of organized business, in a system that works, requires quite a number of leaders. And knowing and understanding that every one of those people is appointed by Hashem, and as the Maharsha explains to us, because Hashem is not just involved in the macro level. To build a building, you need bricks. And what happens to you and I doesn't happen on the macro level. It happens in our day-to-day life, and every leader of any person in the world is appointed by Hashem. And if you'd like to know the answer to what we say in benching, who knows saying lechem l'chol basar, Hashem, you give bread to every man, what it means in plain, simple language is, who gave the wisdom to Joe the farmer to plant wheat and not barley? Who gave him the desire to actually go into farming? And who gave the desire to the board of co-op to put together that co-op, to buy all the wheat so that they could sell it effectively? Who created the mill and the hundreds of people that are running there and the systems that keep it going? Who appointed the person running it and who keeps it running? And who appointed the distribution system and the transportation system? And who gave Zisha the idea of baking and keeps it going? You're watching Hashem. If you'd like to understand Hashem's involvement in the world, study any part of the world. Study anything that happens, any transaction, any industry, any organization, and know that Hashem is behind that. But I think we're just really scratching the surface. If you'd like to really understand Hashem's involvement in the world, I'll share with you a powerful pasuk that the Rishonim explained to us. Palgi mayim leiv melech biyad Hashem. The heart of the king is in the hands of Hashem. And the Ralbag explains what that means. He says it's too dangerous for Hashem to leave the king in charge of his monarchy. Let's say the king on a whim decides to do whatever. The people in his dominion are in grave danger, and therefore Hashem doesn't allow him. The Malbim explains what that means, that a king does not have free will when it comes to his people. I have free will when it comes to myself. I have free will to choose what to eat, when to go to sleep, what to do. But a person who becomes a king loses free will in regards to anything that has to do with the rulership of his people. It would be far too dangerous, and Hashem will never give that control to man. A king has no free will when it comes to issues of his people. And if you'd like to know what this concept means, it really is quite simple. You see, Hashem decided that there had to be a United States of America so that when the Jews, after the Holocaust, landed, they'd have shores on which to land. And therefore Hashem needed there to be a country. And so Hashem put this wave of revolutionary thought into the hearts of man. And Hashem staged and orchestrated a Boston Tea Party. And Hashem organized this concept of taxation without representation, and Thomas Paine to write such a letter, write such a little Igeris. And then the Revolutionary War and all of the steps that were needed for there to become a United States of America. My friends, many a time I've read certain documents and I've said to myself, they could not have been written by man. Read the preamble of the Constitution. It could not have been written by man, and I'd like to share with you it wasn't. Yes, Thomas Jefferson went into seclusion for 16 days. He was not the author. Would you like to know who wrote the Constitution of the United States of America? God wrote it. Because there had to be a United States, and it had to function in a particular way. And if you'd like to see God running the world, open a page of history. You see, when you read a Navi, when you read Yeshaya HaNavi saying, Hashem promises this is what's going to be, you're watching a prophet predict what God's going to do. When you read a history book, you're reading a detailed account of what God did. Because everything that happens is within the control of Hashem. More than that, everything is directed by Hashem, and everything that occurs is Hashem's direct guidance of the world to bring about the goals that He wishes for. And I have one more step. J.K. Rowling did pretty well for herself. A single mom on welfare. She wrote some books, and these books became pretty popular. As you know, Harry Potter at this stage has sold over 450 million books. The best-selling series in the history of mankind. And J.K. Rowling is now richer than the Queen of England. Not too bad for an unemployed, self-made woman. Okay, but here's the point. If you look at the books, they're very complex. We're talking 400 pages, 500 pages, quite a number of them are over 700 pages. And they go through a sequence of 7 years. Harry Potter begins when Harry Potter's 11 years of age, and it goes through his 7 years at Hogwarts. And the detail in the story is incredible. And people study the detail. They read the books cover to cover again and again, children, teenagers, adults, and they discuss it. And somehow the story works. And somehow the details of the story are always right. And no matter how many complexities there are, and this the third volume, and then the fifth volume, but it all ties back and it all works together. And would you like to know why? J.K. Rowling explains why. She had this thought. She had this vision of Harry Potter, 11-year-old kid who finds out he's a wizard. She had that dream on a train. And she started thinking about it, and thinking about it. And she started writing notes, and more notes. And she started writing some details, and some more details. She filled up shoe boxes upon shoe boxes of notes. She explained she had the entire story, all 7 years mapped out before she sat down to write volume number 1. The reason why the story holds true is because she had the whole train of thought all worked out before she started the first book. She saw the end before she began the beginning. If you'd like to understand history, all you have to know is that Hashem has a very clear ending. And Hashem has a very clear goal. And every detail along the way is known to Hashem before you and I began, before the Revolutionary War, well before the Magna Carta was written, well before the Crusades. The point is, Hashem knew the end of the story long before it began. And I want to share with you one more observation. The Ramban in the Drushes explains that a human being will stand judgment 3 different times in his existence. 3 different types of judgments. There's a judgment that we stand on Rosh Hashanah. There's a judgment that we stand when we leave this earth. And then there's a judgment right before Tchias HaMesim. And the Ramban explains that each of these judgments are very, very different. Every Rosh Hashanah we're judged. But that's in a very, very limited fashion. You see, before a person's born, there's a particular life setting that's set for him. How many years he'll live, how much money he'll make, how many children he'll have. So let's take Ruvain. Let's imagine Ruvain was slated to live to 120, have 10 kids, and make a fortune of money. Now, just because that's what was slated doesn't mean Ruvain will actually get that. If Ruvain wakes up one day and says, I don't want to work for a living, he's not going to make a fortune of money. If he decides he's not going to get married, he's not going to have 10 kids. If Ruvain decides that Brooklyn Bridge is a real nice place to jump off of, well, guess what? He's not going to live to 120. Before he was created, there was a certain life setting that was set for him, but he's got to go through the steps and he's got to do what he's supposed to. So too, each of us were given a very exact life setting, the ideal stage setting that will allow us to reach a level of perfection. And every Rosh Hashanah were then judged on it. Meaning to say, I was slated to have this amount of health, live this amount of years, have this amount of success, but each Rosh Hashanah, my Olam Hazeh, this world, my situation in this world is revisited and rejudged. Am I worthy of it? Is it good for me? Do I deserve it? And each one of the details of my life in this world is weighed and measured. But it has nothing to do with the world to come. Tangentially, it might affect me. But everything on Rosh Hashanah, on Yom Kippur that's judged has to do with my station in this world. Health, well-being, poverty, success, all Olam Hazeh type of things. There's a different judgment when I leave this earth. My body's put on the ground and I separate. But I, the conscious I, when I was thinking, leave the body, and instantly I view things from a vastly different perspective. Everything that I so coveted in this world is valueless and foolish. Every mitzvah I value with a tremendous passion as gold and silver. In a heartbeat, my entire understanding of what life was about and why I was here and the values are instantly changed. But that's not judgment. That's an understanding. My body is put in the ground. My vision is no longer occluded, no longer blinded. I get it. That which I always knew deep down to be true, I fully, fundamentally understand. And instantly I look at my life and say, wow, look what I accomplished. And drat, why didn't I do more? In a heartbeat, my entire value system has changed. But that's not judgment. The judgment, when I leave this earth, is in a very different fashion. That judgment is, I hold up a picture of what I could have been. What if I made the right decisions? What if I was 16, I decided to really put my brain on and learn? What if I was 18, I decided to do the right thing? What if I made all the right choices? What was my potential? Where should I have been? What was I destined to be? The judgment on Rosh Hashanah, they compare me to me. This is, judgment when I leave this earth is where they compare me to me. They hold up a picture of what I could have been, and they say, this is what you are, how much of you did you become? And it's very interesting to note, because not every human being reaches his potential. I've been there at a Gateway Shabbaton, and you could see 400 Jews in the room. These are Jews who are so assimilated, so lost. And rabbi after rabbi gets up there and makes a powerful case. And you could see the people in the room going, yeah, the rabbi's right. Yeah, I hear. The Torah was given by God on Sinai. Wow, I hear it, the rabbi's right. And you could watch them throughout the weekend, starting Friday night, Saturday morning, Saturday afternoon, Sunday. You can see them, yeah, the rabbi's right, the rabbi's right. And you know fully well that the vast majority of them are going to leave that weekend the same as they started. But what if that person had said, I hear what the rabbi's saying, and they instantly changed. They said, I'm going to grow, I'm going to find out more, I'm going to start learning. And they became what they were destined to be. What if I heard that Mussar Shmuz and I said, I get it, and I put my life on a different track? Where would I have been? That's the judgment when I leave this earth. But the Ran explains that there's one final judgment that's very, very different. And that's after Mashiach comes, it's after, right before Tiferes Bnei Torah, when every human being who ever existed is brought back. And every person, every culture, every civilization is brought forward, and every human being gets it. Not just me, not just what I could have been, but everything in all of the puzzle, all of the pieces fit together, the entire history of humanity, and what each nation was supposed to do, each part of it, and the effect or the lack of it, and every human being gets it with total clarity. And my friends, I believe that's the answer to this Gemara. Do you know why the Gentile nations each clamor forth, I had a part in the support of Torah? Do you know why they say it? Because they're right. Who runs the world? Who wrote the history book? What does Hashem care about? What Hashem cares about is His nation, His people. And everything that runs in the world runs for one reason, so that the Jewish people should grow, so that they should accomplish. We are the apex, the pinnacle, the center point, the reason for creation. And if we don't get it, certainly the Gentiles amongst whom we live don't understand it, but that's because we live in a very dark times. We live in a very occluded way. But when the veil is lifted, every human being gets it, and the Romans come forth and say, everything we did, why did we do it? We only built those marketplaces. We only made those merchatzos, those bathhouses to the Klal Yisrael. And Hashem says to them, you're right. That's why I had you do it. But you didn't want it for that reason. You wanted it for your selfish reasons, and therefore you have no part of it. And the Persians come forth and say, why we build bridges? And Hashem says, you're right, that's why I had you do it. I used you as the pawn, as the instrument to fulfill my will, but it wasn't your intention, and therefore you get no reward. And nation after nation comes forth, generation after generation, civilization after civilization says the words, the only reason we did everything was that the Jewish nation should learn. And what Hashem is saying to them is, you're right, but you have nothing to do with it because it wasn't your intention. And my friends, this Chazal, to me, is so powerful and eye-opening. And would you like to know why? Simon Wiesenthal lived through the concentration camps. And when he survived, he set his life mission to bring Nazis to justice. And he set out on that path, and he brought over 1,000 Nazi criminals to judgment. Many of them were killed. And he explains what drove him, what gave him his mission. And he explains it was a conversation. It was in 1944. The war was already turning against Germany, and it was clear that Germany was going to lose the war. And he says one day an SS guard turned to him and said, tell me, what if you survive? What if you actually live? How are you going to describe the camps to people? Simon Wiesenthal said, well, I'll tell people the truth. The Nazi laughed. No one will believe that human beings could accomplish such brutality. No one will believe you. Simon Wiesenthal said from that moment he made it his life mission to show the world what happened. But the truth is the world didn't believe it. And if you ask the soldiers who first liberated the camps, they didn't have words to describe it. There was nothing that they had experienced before. They couldn't explain to people what they witnessed. One young U.S. soldier, when he liberated one of the camps, said the words, any word that I would use doesn't fit. What a heinous, barbaric, criminal. There's no words that I have to, because there's no descriptions, nothing that I've ever experienced fits it. My friends, I believe that there will come a time when we will also fall short of words. You see, Mitzvah Hashem, Mashiach comes, and right before Tiferes Bnei Torah, every human being is gathered, and we amongst them. And we will fall desperately short of words. How could I explain the value of one word of learning? How could I explain the incredible change in myself, in the world, by accomplishing one mitzvah? I can't touch it, I can't fathom it. We'll be so short of words when we live in that moment that to think back on it, there's nothing we ever lived before that could touch it. and we will be very, very short of words. And the reason why I think that this is a very powerful concept and very important is because we are right before Yom Kippur. And if you ask a person, what's Yom Kippur about? Obviously, Yom Kippur is a day of Slicha, Mechila. And what a Jew can accomplish in getting rid of Averos is phenomenal. What a gift. I can do things and get rid of them, get them off my record, and it's a gift of incomparable value. But if you'd like to understand Yom Kippur, there's something much bigger than that. We'd like to know what the real goal of a Jew on Yom Kippur should be. A Jew should be able to take stock, look at myself, and ask myself, am I pleased with me? Am I happy with me? Is this all I got? Is this where I want to be? Is this the direction I want to head in? Is this where I want to be 2 years from now, 10 years from now, 20 years from now? Is this the track that I'm on, that I want my grandchildren to talk about me from? And what a Jew should be able to do on Yom Kippur is be able to cut through the veil of darkness. You see, the day is different than any other day. During the course of the year, we're very busy, there's a lot of static, and it's hard to see things clearly. When the fast starts taking effect, and the Kedusha Sayom begins settling in, there's a clarity of understanding, and I can look at my life with vastly different eyes. And I can ask myself, is this all I got? And it's at that moment that hopefully you'll reach deep inside, and you'll say, no, there's more that I could accomplish, way more that I could be doing, and I'm not satisfied. And then you'll probably say to yourself, but what could I do? Realistically, how could I change? How could I say to Hashem, I'm going to be different, I'm going to grow? How could I say it to myself? And there's one answer. Why is it that Talmud Torah keneged kulam? Why is it that of all the mitzvahs, you put them all on one scale and put learning Torah on the other side, learning Torah outweighs them all? Because learning Torah is the most powerful nourishment for the human soul. It changes the world, it changes me, it gives me the energy and strength to become a different human being. And if you want to take on any single Kabbalah on Yom Kippur, it's to increase your Torah study, because that'll change you more than anything else. And particularly if you could take on learning Musar. Rasul Salanta was once asked, if you only have an hour to learn, what should you learn? He said, learn Musar. You'll find you have a lot more than an hour. Because when you learn Musar, and if you could set up a regular Seder in Musar, it changes your perspective, it changes your understanding, your value system changes, and more than anything, if a Jew can take on a Kabbalah to learn more, especially Musar, it changes his life, it changes who he is. But the problem is, it's very difficult. And what I'd like to share with you is, when you appreciate that moment to come, if you could focus on the future, if you could focus on the value that every Gentile will place on the words of Torah, I think it could be a powerful moving force. I have a guy friend about 10 years now. About 10 years ago, we got an email, somebody in Holland wanted to make a large donation to the Shmuz. I told the fellow who was running the office, call him first before you give bank information. You don't give bank information on the internet. So the fellow called him, had a long conversation, and he comes back and says, yeah, it's from Jew, yeah, fine. I said, okay, give him the information. And Kachava, there was a very nice donation that was wire transferred into the Shmuz account. Okay, so naturally it was only right that I thank him. So I got the phone number, and I called this person up, and I started speaking to him, and he starts quoting the Shmuz and this one and that one. And after about 20 minutes or so, I said, you know, I didn't even know that they were from Jews in Holland. Silence. I'm not Jewish. Are you not? I mean, he'd use all the right words and all the expressions, and he knew every Shmuz backwards and forwards. No, I'm a Zayim Mitzvah Bnei Noach. Keep this Noahide laws. Oh. And then a little bit later in the conversation, he says to me, and you're probably wondering, as many people do, so why aren't I Magayer? So I'll say to you, as I say to my wife, and these were his words, if HaKadosh Baruch Hu deemed it appropriate to make us Goyim, why should I be Matriach Hashem? That's what Hashem wants us to be. I've spoken to this man every year on a regular basis, and this past spring I had the opportunity to actually meet him and his wife. We went for dinner in Eretz Yisrael. By the way, 3 years ago I was in Eretz Yisrael, and an elderly gentleman, long white beard, rabbinic frock, comes over to me and says, I just want to introduce myself, I'm Wim's Rav. This gentleman's Rav. You see, he only asked shilas to this particular Rav living in Eretz Yisrael. You have to understand. Okay, what am I saying to you? If I could share with you the respect that he has for a Jew, the respect that he has for me as a Rav, and he even thinks I'm a Talmid Chacham, reverence and respect you cannot imagine. My friends, do you understand that is the respect that's due to any Jew? You're God's chosen people. You're Hashem's Am HaNivchar. And if you've learned, and certainly if you've grown in learning in any extent, if you've gone to yeshiva, and you've learned Chumash and Rashi, and you've learned Mishnayos, you're a person of extraordinary value. We don't look at it that way. Whatever, the guy Dominic's in shul maybe learned, doesn't learn, Daf Yomi doesn't learn, who cares, whatever. But there'll come a day when every human being will look at us with vastly different eyes. And if we could tap into that moment, if you could imagine Achros Hayomim, when every nation comes forth and says, I had a part in it, and every technological advancement and everything brought to mankind is clearly seen by all for one reason, so that the Jewish people could learn. If you could tap into that moment, you could have a tremendous understanding of the value of Torah, the effect of it, and I believe it could be a very, very powerful motivating force to take on learning and to grow. However, it's very difficult. Would you like to know why? It's very, very simple. The reason why this is very, very difficult for it to work, and the reason why for most people it won't work, is quite simple. You see, this has to do with Achris Hayomim. This has to do with the time of Mashiach and Tiferes Bnei Torah, and it's got nothing to do with me because I'll be dead. I'll be dead, right? I mean, I'll be dead, right? Asleep in the box, dead, like Harvey was a good man. Harvey's in his final resting place. But I'll be asleep, I'll be dead, I won't be there. This is Tiferes Bnei Torah, the Romans, the Persians, that's great stuff, but I won't be there. I'll be black, asleep, dead. So what's it got to do with me? And the Rizal Salant explains that this is the single greatest mistake that we human beings make. Would you like to know the difference between death and when I'm alive? He says it's very simple. Imagine I walk in the room and I hang up my coat. The coat's outside and I walk into the room. Explains the Rizal Salant that is death. I am the one inside. I'm the one who tells my arms and legs to move. I am the neshama. My body is put in the ground. I separate and I stand in front of Hashem. But it's me, not my distant cousin, not my alter ego, not some scaled down version of me. And it's not black. It's not asleep. It's brilliantly, acutely aware and awake, but it's me. And if you could tap into that moment and understand that at that moment, everything I valued in this world, money and prestige and dress, gorgeous coat. You see how pretty my dress is? Oh, I feel so good about myself because my dress is so in style. What do you think you're going to care about that then? It won't matter. You won't even understand how you could be so blind. But the point is that all of us will be there, but it's me, not my distant cousin, not my alter ego. My body's put in the ground, I separate, and at that moment, everything I understand is with such a different perspective. And normally it's quite difficult to feel that, but Yom Kippur is a very, very unique day. On Yom Kippur, a person can tap into things that he normally can't. On Yom Kippur, a person can hook into things that normally you can't feel, but then you can. And at that moment, you can begin to understand the value of Limud Torah, and you can understand the change that it makes in you. On Yom Kippur, there's a lot to think about. I have to think about how I relate to other people. I have to think about how I relate to my brother, my sister, my father, my mother. If you are married, I guarantee there's an awful lot for you to take stock of. Because how you speak to your spouse, with what regard and respect you treat your spouse, is a huge, huge parsha. And everyone has complaints. Oh, my husband, my wife, and I hear it all day long. This one about that one and that one about this one. And they always fail to remember that they also have a part in this. And believe me, if you're married, there's an awful lot to think about on Yom Kippur, but it's not just if you're married. There's so many issues that we have to take stock. How I daven, how I treat other people, how I act as a human being, how I act in business. Am I honest? Am I a walking Kiddush Hashem? But one thing that you can change more than anything else, and one thing that will change everything else, is how much involvement you have in Torah study. Because if you take on to learn more, especially again if it's Musar, you're going to change the direction of your life. And it's so hard to change. It's so hard to change an area, but if you take on to learn the halachas of that area, you can change it. And if you want to work on Shmir Shaloshan, you'll learn the halachas. You want to work on Ben Adam L'Chaveru, you'll learn the halachas. Why is that? Because it changes you, it gives you the nourishment, gives you the power. And again, if it's hard, I think tapping into that moment of Achras Hayomim is very powerful and can make a real difference in our understanding. I think this Chazal is a very, very eye-opening understanding. The Romans come forth, the Persians come forth, each ummah. How do they say such lies? Because it's not lies. Hazones ha'olam kulo, Hashem feeds the entire world. What does it mean? I buy my bread from Zisha's bakery. The answer is Hashem runs the world, the entire sequence of events. Every system, every organization, from Joe the farmer to the mill to the co-op to the bakery, Hashem is completely involved. Every technology that comes to the marketplace is when Hashem wants it to be because it's appropriate and proper. Every discovery of mankind. And understanding that Hashem runs the world. No king is appointed that Hashem doesn't want there. Kings don't have free will. But more than that, understanding that Hashem has a very particular purpose in creating the world and running the world. Much like J.K. Rowling knew the end of the story before she sat down to write it, Hashem knows the end of history. And Hashem has one goal. Hashem created the world to give us the opportunity to grow, to accomplish, to be close to Him for our ultimate benefit. And the greatest nourishment is Limud Torah, and that's what Hashem wants to happen. And everything that happens in civilization, everything that happens in history, happens for that reason. So that there should be a Lakewood, so that there should be a Mir Yerushalayim, so that there should be a Chofetz Chaim Queens. And we don't view it that way. We view it as it's a busy world and there are a lot of things going on in the world, and that's true. But Hashem has one goal, and that goal is our growth, and learning of Torah is the greatest pivot point of it all. And in a time like Yom Kippur, you can understand it, and you can take on new goals, new objectives, new points, and you could reach what you can't before. And I want to close with one last thought. It used to be very difficult to imagine Achris HaYomim. It used to be very difficult to imagine Mashiach's time. But my friends, if you even just slightly pay attention to what's happening in the world today, it's as obvious as the nose in front of you. After almost 2,000 years, the Jewish people not only have existed, we're back in our homeland. When that homeland was a barren, austere wasteland in the 1880s, and now it's fully built up. We keep the same Torah, we keep the same mitzvahs. There are 10 halacha l'Moshe Sinai's in tefillin, and the tefillin that I wear is the same as Rashi or Tosas, but it's the same as Abaye and Rava. And the tzitzit that are on my beged are the same as were worn in Bavel. We've kept every part of the Torah. It's a miracle beyond description. The fact that we exist is a miracle beyond description. The fact that we reconquered our land. And the fact that Torah flourishes today as it never did before in history. They say that since the great yeshivas of Surah and Papadisya, there were never as many full-time Torah scholars learning. And by now it's way more than even the great yeshivas. There's never been a time like that. And we even see something even more unprecedented. We see Bali Tshuva coming out of the woodwork. I often daven Or Sameach. It's a 12-minute walk from my house. And you see guys whose grandmothers didn't know what Shabbos candles were, and they're shuckling and they're davening and they're keeping Siddur. It's amazing. But if you don't get it, just look at a country called Iran. Watch the most powerful man in the free world bend over 6 times backwards. Please, please, I want to give you nuclear capacity. There's never been such foolishness, such folly in existence. World War II was fought with criminals and against people who were not even as bent on the destruction of America as is Iran. It's not only death to Israel, it's death to America, and they scream it and they say it, and the President of the United States of America begs them to sign a treaty. Please, please, okay, we won't even inspect the nuclear facilities. We won't even hold it. We'll give you $150 billion. Just please sign this treaty that gives you nuclear armaments. What insanity, what lack of understanding could drive a human being to do it. And don't tell me self-aggrandizement and putting his name in the history books. It makes no sense. You're watching Hashem running the world. But it's so clearly out of control, so clearly out of the norm that there's no choice but to say, I get it. We're mamish odd steps away from Mashiach coming. And my friends, that should be a powerful force to motivate us. Why? Because Mashiach is a great time. But at that point, there's very little growth. There's no fight, there's no war, there's no Yetzer Hara. Every human being understands things, and there's no accomplishments that we can do now. Now in the darkness, now when it's so difficult, we reach out to Hashem and say, Hashem, please help me. And we set goals, and we reach for the stars, and we even get part there. The schar is unbelievable, the change is unbelievable. May Hashem grant us the wisdom, understanding to put this into practice. May Hashem grant you a good, sweet New Year. If anyone has questions, please feel free to come over now. Also, I want to mention that I'm hopefully starting a number of live webinars right after Sukkot. If you're not signed up on the email list, there's in the lobby there's a iPad. You can put your name on it, and you'll find out all about the various Musar webinars and various webinars that are broadcast regularly. I broadcast them from, I have a little sound studio. I sometimes get a little lonely because there aren't as many people there as I wish would be there. So if you do want to be a part of it, it's participative. And there's meaning to say people ask questions, people go back and forth. So if you're not on the email list, please put your name there. And if you are on the email list, please read your emails because you'll start seeing some information about it. And I want to thank Chazaq again for partnering with the Shmuz on this, and thank you very much.